and welcome back to Fascism on Film. I'm James Kent. Along with me is Teal Minton. And for the past 11 episodes, this is the 12th, we've been talking about fascism on film. And this is kind of the end of our first season. And really, what does that mean? It just means that we feel like we've hit a logical stop place for this kind of lead up into, say, World War II. And we've given you, definitions of what fascism is and some examples of films that you can look at and maybe get a better understanding. But we're going to be back. We don't know exactly when, but we're hoping just only like a few weeks of a gap with our second season. What we want to do now is kind of start to record those episodes and have them in a queue, because we want you to be able to experience the show 1 week at a time. And so that's what we set up with this first season. And we want to have that same thing for the next season. And we do have a lot of interesting movies. We certainly have not run dry on films about fascism.
We have a ton of films to get through.
Yeah. And so that's what's exciting. So please catch up on the episodes that you haven't heard yet and let some folks know. And then, join us for season 2. Again, hopefully I'd say by, October, maybe sooner, but, October for sure. And this episode, I would say that our last episode, To Be or Not to Be, was our planned end of the season. But we already heard some feedback, and we had a listener who made a request sort of to us, and it doesn't fit. It certainly fits the genre of fascism on film. Oh boy, does it. But it doesn't fit really what we were talking about at this point. It's a sci-fi look.
We had sort of been in Paxton's earlier stages, right?
Yes.
We'd sort of gone up through stage 4, but we were kind of hanging around in 3 and 4. And this film is radicalization, which is what Goebbels called total war. And it's just endless war. And that's sort of, this film starts in a war and continues in war and is all about war.
Yeah. And again, it's a sci-fi look. And so what's interesting, I think what we thought was that in a future season, we might do a whole focus of episodes on fascism sci-fi movies, because sci-fi being, science fiction, it's almost a breeding ground to look at stories of dystopia and if, what happens if, fascism became the rule of the day? What if Germany had its 1,000-year Reich actually be successful?
Exactly. Would it have become sort of a more kind of authoritarian type environment and less what we consider fascist? It could have we don't know what it would have turned into, but these science fiction films allow us to sort of do these what ifs with different scenarios of how authoritarian, totalitarian, and fascist societies and governments would work.
So, we've been teasing about this movie that we're going to talk about, and I think it's a real litmus test for viewers. And it certainly was when it came out in theaters in 1997. So the film we're going to be talking about is Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, which many have seen. And if you haven't seen it, well, maybe you'll be intrigued enough after hearing our podcast episode to check it out. But what's fascinating about this movie is that it was not a box office success. It did okay.
No.
It did okay. It was really, in 97, it was before the years of international box office really being a huge part of the equation. And so U.S. box office was really whether the success was measured. And it came out in late summer of 97, and it looked like this great action sci-fi blockbuster.
Yeah.
And like I said, it did okay, but critics, by and large, they were appalled by the movie, and that because basically they were like, it's just a celebration of fascism. How dare this Verhoeven guy do this?
I think it was Stephen Hunter who said this is a thoroughly Nazi movie. It's just Nazi through and through, and there's no way out of it. It's just a Nazi movie. And I think a lot of people took it that way. There were definitely, I remember, I went to see it opening day, and one of the reviews in the LA Times on the poster on the ad was the greatest war film ever made. And so some people were into it as the war film that it is, as the action film. Some people were like, it's an action film that's also fascist. And then there's this third group that was, it's a fascist action film that's a satire.
That's the litmus test aspect.
Exactly.
Is that the film, I think, the reason why it didn't do well is because there were some people, and I think it caught a fan base on video, but this is where
Yes.
its initial trajectory got even more muddied, is a lot of people in America watch this film and we're like, this is the most kick-ass, awesome film where we're just kicking ass on these alien bugs.
Yes, and it is just a kick-ass action movie with lots of gore and shooting and big set pieces, and it can be very exciting as a war movie. It's similar to a lot of other war movies. It definitely takes on every trope and cliche and sort of celebrates them. And I think that if you the goofy aspect, like the things that are clearly a joke, I think people just sort of laugh off and then think, hey, it's a great kick-ass action movie, and they're not really looking at what those goofy elements are pointing out, or what what this is saying about the type of society where only veterans can vote, right? That this is a fully militarized, like militarism as a civic religion kind of society, and that's very different, and that's what we're rooting for, essentially. If we're rooting for the humans in this film, is we're rooting for this heavily militarized society that is all about war.
This is what a lot of critics were reacting to initially. They seem to be overly concerned that what Verhoeven they thought he was like advocating somehow this fascist viewpoint, and that audiences, they were so concerned that they weren't going to get it or see that there was some satire there, and that's why they were appalled, because again, by and large, a lot of audience, they took it at face value and were all team America or team world.
Team Federation.
But the Federation, yes, and citizenship, that was the big thing. So I was that audience that saw it opening weekend like yourself.
Me too, yeah.
Saw it with my uncle, and very quickly watching this, I didn't know going in. I thought I saw the previews, and I thought this is like some action movie, right, where we're going to be faced with extinction by these bugs. And what I got quickly, and I loved, because I was laughing out loud. I was like, oh, this guy is like doing a satire on fascism. Look what's going on here. This is brilliant. He's making fun of the whole machismo. Look at the outfits, the whole military, everything about it I thought was brilliant. So why I loved it from the get-go was that it was a great satire about fascism.
Well, and it tells you that pretty explicitly right at the beginning. It opens with a propaganda reel and is telling you about the bugs and the war and everything. But it's this, you got to join up. Do you want to know more about it?
Do you want to know more?
Do you want to know more? And it's sort of clicking through these news stories on a website, and they're all about death and destruction and the glory of war. And so it's such a jokey, cartoony kind of propaganda reel that we have to sort of the film is asking us right in the first 2 minutes to get on board with the joke. And you got on board with the joke. I got on board with the joke, although I have to say that every time I watch this film, I see more in it about fascism. I see more details, things that I missed other times, scenes that I thought were sort of throwaway to the love triangle or something, are actually about fascism.
Verhoeven, who's Dutch, he was a little child.
Yep, he was a child in Nazi-occupied Holland.
Yeah, and so he hates the Nazis.
Yes.
And, he's another film that, Teal, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but it might be something that we will need to look at in
Black Book.
Black Book, which is really awesome. The love triangle, it comes right out of Reich cinema.
Yes, it absolutely does. Well, and
we've seen some of these Reich cinema movies.
Yeah, but that's the thing that I didn't really realize the first time I saw it, is that Verhoeven is actually taking a lot of tropes from Reich cinema and from those Hitler's Hollywood movies, and that those war films are about Something that's sort of different than American war films is that death is seen as a glorious release and sacrifice for the Federation, and that there is glory in death, and we have big fancy funerals and all that kind of stuff, and death is celebrated, and that's something that's incredibly fascist, and you see in these Reich cinema films, and they also, of course, glorify soldiers and the militarism and everything. But that weird romance triangle thing is right out of like Request Concert.
That exactly. And there's also this interesting, very fascist hero's journey of Johnny Rico,
Yes.
where he has to be broken down and rebuilt up to be the ultimate white male hero.
And he's actually publicly flogged for screwing up on the training course and getting somebody killed. He's publicly flogged in almost this kind of crucifixion pose. He's strapped up and whipped, and he's suffering for all the other soldiers, right? And so it's sort of, I mean, in a way, it's saying that all militaries are fascistic, but like you mentioned, the hero's journey, what this Johnny Rico character is going on, he starts off as this, like in so many war movies, this innocent kid who becomes this grizzled warrior by the end. But in doing that, he is sort of, the film holds him up as this fascist ideal of this man of action. He's not one of the thinkers. He's out there on the front lines with a gun and mobile infantry. And he's sort of, and this is the other thing, is that Verhoeven said he wanted actors who were just empty-headed Aryans. And so he wanted actors who didn't give the characters a lot of depth, but were these sort of shallow archetypes of fascism.
Poor Casper Van Dien.
Poor guy. I don't think he knows I don't think he knew why he was cast.
Neither did Denise Richards at the time.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's a question. I really feel like some of the actors are not in on the joke in this movie. I think Neil Patrick Harris is definitely in on the joke.
He almost wink and nods his way through, and it's great because he's almost like, are you serious? Like with the leather coats and everything has this very Nazi aesthetic. The costumes, it's so brilliant.
It might as well just be an SS uniform for all what it's worth, because it becomes more and more. It goes farther and farther into the aesthetic as the film goes on. Like, we don't really have those SS uniforms in the first half hour, but by the last half hour, there's a lot of them.
Verhoeven, again, with this litmus test, is saying, look, if by the end of the movie you don't get that the humans are the villains and these bugs are just defending themselves, then I haven't, then either there's something wrong with you or there's something in the way I directed it. But it was pretty obvious to me that the bugs are actually not the villains, and they're highly intelligent.
And, one thing that's funny is that the bugs are literally throwing rocks at us, right? And we're going in with like nuclear weapons, and they are literally throwing rocks at the planet. That's their entire military operation. And otherwise, we just go in and attack their home world and try to kill them and eradicate them and eliminate their entire race, is what's said at one point. It gets that explicit. We're going to kill your whole race. And there's also talk about the human race and how this is survival and this is the existential threat, and that the enemy, that other thing we see in fascism all the time, where the enemy is weak and stupid and also incredibly dangerous and competent and threatening at the same time. That contradiction of the enemy, and so the bugs are dumb, but they're also going to kill us all.
Yeah, because basically they're not humans, but they're highly intelligent, but they're treated as that they're this lowest of the caste system, that these bugs don't deserve to live.
Yes, and so as a result, they shoot them all up. I mean, this movie is gory. That's the other thing, is he doesn't hold back on the gore. He's not trying to sanitize war in some way, but in fact, the gore, I think, almost makes the action more glorious.
This movie. So it's another interesting thing is, so it takes place in the future, and in this future, and again, I haven't read Robert Heinlein's book.
I have.
Which he was very fascist himself, right?
Yeah. Well, and the book, I would say, is less fascist and more militaristic. And I understand that those two intersect really well. But the book is fascist in what you take away from it, maybe, but it's more about militarism and that sort of putting a culture towards militarism as opposed to the eradicating the enemy. It's played a little differently in the book. Verhoeven definitely took what was in the book and sort of took it to a logical extreme and then turned it in on itself.
So what's interesting is, and I don't know because I didn't read the book, so I don't know if Verhoeven was just making an additional statement. But Johnny Rico, his family, they live in what?
Buenos Aires,
right? Yeah. But they're the whitest family, and what it kind of says is that in this future, white expansion has gone.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's gone beyond America, and that Johnny Rico might have this, foreign-sounding name, but he's about as white and Aryan as you can be. And of course, Buenos Aires, right? There's a tie-in there of the Nazis.
Yeah, there are black soldiers in this movie.
There are, yes,
but there are not black characters.
There's like one.
Yeah.
He doesn't have much of a role, but yes, barely.
Not much of a role, but there aren't really. It's a very white, clean, glossy, wholesome kind of look to the main cast.
Here's one thing that, again, it's pretty obvious now when you watch it. And of course, it's a movie that has appreciated like a fine wine, where people finally, have tackled this movie. And it's probably why we weren't going to tackle it originally, is because we felt like, well, there's been podcasts and discussions, and usually
this film is now taught in college classes on fascism.
Yeah, so I mean, it's almost like the obvious choice, and we're not trying to go for the obvious choice, but here we are. But there's an amazing scene that if you don't get it by this scene, then you're someone who's really clueless. Is that the great Michael Ironside's character? Mm-hmm. He's his teacher when they're like at the academy, and he's basically going over the history and how democracy failed, right?
Well, no, that's his line. This year we talked about the failure of democracy, how the social scientists brought civilization to the brink, and veterans saved us, and veterans created this society, and so basically we got rid of all that woke social science that was telling.
Well, that's the thing. It's like a whole MAGA. It's like he's speaking the MAGA language, and that's really what these people that are very nationalistic and think of America, but really there's an advocacy for just dissolving democracy and replacing it with whatever that is.
Well, and in this case, it's replacing it with an endless war machine, which was essentially what Nazi Germany became. And this movie doesn't end with them defeating the bugs or eradicating the bugs. It ends with another propaganda reel saying, we're going to keep fighting forever. And so this is just a little view of this like endless war that could probably go on for centuries in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. There won't be a point. Once you've gone to total war, there isn't a point at which you return to peace. You're either defeated or you continue war forever. And another thing, you mentioned Razchek, and there's a few of these things. Razchek is missing an arm, clearly lost in the military service.
Well, because they've been battling these bugs. It's not like
it's been going on for a while.
It's been going on for a while, and what Verhoeven continually makes this point. He's constantly pointing out all of these veterans, right, who are now they're like in wheelchairs or other things are going wrong, and you have the one was at Rue McClellan, she's blind.
She's all blind and covered in scars, and there's the guy who's missing legs and an arm.
Yeah, and it's basically he's pointing out how war is not a good thing.
No, not at all. It's incredibly destructive, but at the same time, the movie is like, yeah, war, rah, rah. But he's part of the reason he has all the gore and the mutilation is to show us that this is actually really kind of horrible. But, like when Razchek finally gets kind of eaten up at the end and he says, Johnny, you know what to do. And Johnny shoots him to take him out of his misery. Like that's another fascist moment.
Oh, yes. I mean, the deaths in here of any main character who dies has to die a victorious death.
like Dizzy's death is really fantastic. And then even though she gets impaled by one of the arachnids, she doesn't die immediately. She gets to say, I love you to Johnny before she dies. And then they have a huge military funeral for her that is like right out of a Nazi propaganda film, the way the set design is done for this. And they've got a flag over the coffin. They haven't done any other funerals for any other grunts in the movie, but for the main character, they need a big, fancy, elaborate funeral with lots of fascist trappings.
Patrick Muldoon, who plays Xander Barcalau, and he, of course, that's where the love triangle there. He's,
Yes.
With Denise Richards, Carmen Ibanez, and I can't remember. He dies heroically too at the end, right?
Yes, he actually, so the whole thing is that there's a brain bug, and there's one smart bug, and they have kind of a hive mind, and all the other arachnids operate off this brain bug. So they go to find the brain bug at the end of the movie. And Xander finds the brain bug, and he's the one who says, one of these days, someone like me is going to kill your whole race.
Yeah.
And then, and then the brain bug sucks his brain out. And and we find out that they are actually like learning about us the way we're learning about them, and that they are highly intelligent. And then the big and I see this as repeated as memes. And in fact, a lot of images from this movie have been turned into memes. But the one that I saw recently is they bring the brain bug out, and Neil Patrick Harris, who is sort of psychic, goes up.
I love that.
He goes up and touches it, and they say, "What's it thinking?" And he says, "It's afraid." And as soon as he says it's afraid, the whole battlefield starts cheering, "Yay, yay, we've put fear into our enemies." And like, as though that's the good thing, is that they should be afraid of us, right?
Yeah, but here's a question. Do you think, because it's never really fully explained, do you think that Neil Patrick Harris's character actually has psychic abilities, or is it another like sort of, right-wing trope where they like, oh yeah, and he just happens to do good on some tests, and so they say he does. And
I think he does, because there's a whole other thing about it in one of the propaganda reels about getting tested for psychic abilities. And so it's part of the world a little. I don't know. Maybe it's all just propaganda.
But isn't that classic fascism though? Isn't that they like put out the alternate history, the alternate truth, and they sell this idea that you might be clairvoyant?
The alternate truth in this case is that the bugs are the aggressors, when in fact we invaded them first. We probably let through the meteor that destroys Buenos Aires in the Reichstag fire false flag operation. So it's hinted at sort of in little throwaway lines here and there that Earth started the war, and that the bugs are on the defensive essentially. And so that's, again, it plays into that whole total war thing. Let's create an enemy. Let's attack them. Let's play the victims. Let's put ourselves across as the victims, as the bugs as the aggressors. So I think that that's the fake story that they're going for, along with the just sacrifice yourself for a vote.
Yeah, well, because service is citizenship.
Service is citizenship.
In the Federation.
Yeah. And so I think that, the other thing that Verhoeven's doing here is, because this is so much like so many other war movies, like All Quiet on the Western Front begins also in a classroom scene, and it has this group of young friends, and then they go off to war and are changed by it. And that's sort of one of the foundational war films is All Quiet on the Western Front. And you see the cost of war on these characters, and they die and they're maimed, and it's just this horrible cost. Whereas here, we see the cost, but the cost is celebrated as a noble cost, the loss of limbs or life or whatever it is. And so I think that Verhoeven is not just doing a parody of fascism, but he's doing a parody of war movies. And in a way, pointing out that war movies have a fascistic angle to them, sort of all of them. Any movie that is putting death as heroic and noble sacrifice has some fascistic elements to it.
Now, in many ways, it's, I think, Verhoeven's best film, because what he's doing here, I don't know a lot of other movies have ever done this, where he takes the joke all the way through.
Yeah.
He basically says, no, it's a satire and I'm making you complicit if you can't figure that out. But like there's no part at the end going, oh my gosh, the bugs are actually are good and we're bad and oh my God, what are we doing? No. He doesn't let up to the very end of the movie. You're still on the fascist train.
You're still on the fascist train. You leave the theater going, we will fight and we will win. And and because, I mean, it is, the war scenes are fun and exciting and glorious and all of that. And so he's telling us all those war films you've gone to, all those sacrifices you've gotten excited about, all those things that excite you are appealing to the part of you that is fascist, fascism is alluring in certain ways, right? And certainly in the aesthetic sense, we haven't really gone into that in much detail, but clearly Verhoeven watched Triumph of the Will and other Nazi propaganda films, and his imagery is inspired by those.
Well, he's gone on record as saying that he used that, and again, he ran into problems with the studio when they finally saw the movie, and they were like, whoa, what the hell are you doing? And he has not just shot selection and setups, but like the angles. So
yes.
If you were to take on Triumph of the Will, if you're like, oh, I got to see this Triumph of the Will now, what I would do is watch that and then watch this movie and see how Verhoeven has used that as an aesthetic template. And a lot of the things that we talked about of when we did the Triumph of the Will episode, play into that. I mean, it's like, it is the boilerplate for if you want to understand the aesthetics of fascism, watch Triumph of the Will. And then you see how filmmakers take that for different purposes. And I mean, if I was to put a top 10 list together of the best movies to kind of tackle fascism in a unique way, this would be in that top 10.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's one of the first films that comes to mind when we tell people we're doing this show is the two films that people have said to me are Starship Troopers and Jojo Rabbit. But it just shows what's happened to Starship Troopers over the last 30 years or so. Since it came out, that it's now really highly regarded as one of the great satires in motion picture history, because it's really hard to do satire. Nobody wants to finance it. And you have to think that they didn't really know what Verhoeven was doing. They thought they were making another Total Recall, right? Like a big action movie. And Verhoeven had other plans, and some of them are fairly subtle, right? You have to, and as much as this movie hits you over the head with how fascist it is, I can see studio executives seeing the dailies and not picking up on it.
I had a conversation with somebody in the past year.
Yeah.
And as a movie fan, we talked about this movie and they mentioned how much they love it. They hadn't seen it in a long time. But when I started talking about the fascism parts, they had this blank stare and their mouth kind of opened and was like, I didn't get that at all. And I'm not saying this person's maybe the best moviegoer, but it kind of confirmed for me that there are a lot of people that discovered this movie and just they didn't see it. And, that's what it speaks to me today of like, why are we in the kind of mess we're in today as a society? Because there's a half of the country that literally does not see what they're falling for is fascism. They just don't see it at all.
Not only that, it's, it's watching this movie is, like you said, the litmus test. Either you get it, or you're on board with it. Right. And if you're on board cheering on Rico, that's appealing to that fascist part inside all of us. And so if you don't see it, if you don't see what the movie is doing and you just get on board with it as just another sci-fi war movie, like, say, Edge of Tomorrow or something, right, where it's just people killing aliens, if you get on board with it for that, well, you're kind of getting on board with fascism.
Well, keep in mind another thing, right? And this is why is this movie to me like it's, 10 stars out of 10 as far as being brilliant? Because after everything we just said and how much we abhor fascism, let's face it, even though our brain is going, oh,
Yeah.
I'm for the, you get caught up in the story, you're enjoying it, you like the characters, you're rooting for them, even though you shouldn't be rooting for them, you root for them. And I'm saying that as a person. I'm like, yeah, I'm still in for them. Like, I like the love triangle with Diz and them. And like, he sucks us in. The costume, I mean, Dina Myers in this movie, Verhoeven knows how to push buttons of men. And you're like, this is the hottest thing I've ever seen, in which he's wearing those like suspender things and everything. I mean, he knows how he can use costumes to make this woman sexually attractive, but in this fascist way, there's like, he's fetishizing, but he's throwing it all in there. He's putting everything in for an audience.
One thing that we see in like Reich cinema all the time is traditional gender roles is a big part of fascism, and we don't see that in this film. That's something that's been, I think, in the sci-fi sense, is that there's not a lot of gender roles. In fact, the men and women in the military shower together, and it's not considered a big deal at all. They're all in the locker room together.
In this society, right, we've moved past that part because it's really about citizenship, that above all other things. So it's not about whether you're a man or a woman.
The dividing line in society is citizenship, not race, not class, not gender, but just whether you have served in the military or not. And if you have, you get to be a citizen, a member of the voting populace.
Even the costumes of the women, it's a little bit on the masculine side, right?
Well, I mean, you could say that about all military uniforms, though.
Yeah, but I mean, but even like the people that aren't the grunts, right? So
right.
Denise Richards, but she's still looking pretty good in that outfit.
The movie, you're absolutely right, though. It does have this aspect of, I mean, it definitely sexualizes the women, but not, it definitely sexualizes Dina Meyer, and I think that's part of it. Plays into, again, that appealing to the fascist part of us. Is that he's, like you said, he's pushing these buttons, and the sexuality is one of them. Violence is another one. Like, blood and shirtless people are part of the same titillating wheelhouse, where it's trying to get us involved on a more visceral level to be cheering these guys on, and we are cheering them on. And then at the end of the movie, hey, we rooted for the Nazis.
Well, I will say that in 1997, when this came out, I was a little shocked by the violence because I hadn't seen a movie that had this explicit violence. And then you watch it today, and it just shows you how much has happened in almost 30 years. It doesn't feel as shocking as it did then.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel quite as shocking. We see this kind of stuff basically on TV now. And
exactly.
The other thing is, I will point out, though, is that a lot of the effects in this movie, a lot of the gore effects are practical. There is CGI in the movie, but a lot of the gore is done practically, and it's very different from the CGI gore we're seeing these days.
I feel like, do we cover any new ground here? Maybe, maybe not.
I think that, this is a movie worth watching if you are in on the joke, and if you know ahead of time what you're getting into. You have a movie that you can pull a lot out of about how fascism draws people in and creates this kind of world that is self-contained, really, in a sense.
Especially if you haven't seen the movie, or you haven't seen it in years, and say you're somebody that was like, oh, I didn't pick up on that before. Watch it and then have as a cheat sheet those 14 points of fascism, and see what boxes it ticks. I bet you it ticks every single one of them.
It almost does. I did go through it, and the one that the traditional gender roles is not as close, but that's made up for in other ways.
All right. So look, this has been season 1 of Fascism on Film, and we've enjoyed bringing these episodes to you and talking about it. I mean, again, I don't know if it's an enjoyable subject, let's say, but, I think that just in light of, I feel like the re-rise of fascism throughout the globe, that it's important that we start to look at these things and just see like, oh,
well, if we recognize things as fascist in movies, and we see those things going on in our world, and you say worldwide, and you're absolutely right. It's the sort of far right movements are happening all over the world, not just in Western democracies, and so if we see those things in our own world, we can recognize them and maybe do something to stop them, or at least protect ourselves.
Yeah, and then look, if you have to have an argument with somebody who like maybe fascistic but doesn't realize it, maybe by seeing these movies and you're doing a little research, you're going to be better armed to, I don't know, maybe help a friend to get out of that cult.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I said, we're on fascismonfilm.com, and we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of those, and we will be back shortly, I think, with our second season.
Like and subscribe, and if you happen to write us a review on one of the podcast sites, Apple or Spotify, that would be fantastic. If you like the show, write us a review. If you don't like it, stop listening and leave us alone.
Yeah, I mean, we need to spread the anti-fascism far and wide. But again, thank you, everyone. This has been me, James Kent, and with me is Teal Minton.
Thank you.